وعليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد. Respected brothers and sisters, friends and elders, undoubtedly one of the greatest blessings of Allah Ta'ala to us is our children. One of the greatest blessings of Allah Ta'ala to us, Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, He says that wealth and children, they are adornments of this dunya, meaning that they are what makes this dunya attractive. Oftentimes we are distracted due to one of these two reasons, either because of our wealth, because of our jobs, because of our money, income, and so on, or because of our children. We're often distracted from other things because of one or two reasons. Right? So it's important that we, as Muslims, as a minority in this country, as individuals who have migrated to this country, it's very important that we look after the well-being of our children. And of course, well-being, most of us, we look after their physical well-being. And this is definitely important. Most of us, we look after the children's physical well-being. We make sure that they're well-fed, that they're clothed, that they have a roof over their heads. And we put a lot of emphasis on this. And we should. We should put a lot of emphasis on this. But just as equally, if not more important, is that we're concerned about their spiritual well-being. That we're concerned about how they're spiritually growing. And the responsibility towards that. In a hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, "Ala kullukum ra'in wa kullukum mas'ulun 'an ra'iyyatihi." He says, this is a very, very famous hadith. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that, understand every single one of you must understand this very well. Kullukum ra'in, every single one of you are shepherds. You are all shepherds. Wa kullukum mas'ulun 'an ra'iyyatihi. Every single one of you will be asked about your flock. You'll be asked about the people under your subordinates, the people under your care. And so thereafter, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, he says that a man is responsible for his family, the members of his household. He'll be asked about the members of his household. And a woman is responsible for the members of her household. And she will also be questioned and asked about her responsibilities as well. So it's very important that we understand our responsibilities very well. That it is not only our responsibility to look after the physical well-being, but more importantly, it's important to look after the spiritual well-being of our children. And I've mentioned this multiple times. I've spoken about this topic. At least once a year, I try to speak on this topic, which is the topic of looking after our children. Today, alhamdulillah, it's a good opportunity as most of our kids are out from school, and alhamdulillah, many of you have brought your kids, mashallah, which is very good. But this is a very good sign, alhamdulillah, that we bring our kids for Jumu'ah, we bring our kids to the masjid. This is a big responsibility. Now, I wanted to discuss a few different topics. Or rather, it's one topic which has multiple related questions associated with it. So the first is to understand that our responsibility is not only for the physical well-being, but also the spiritual well-being of our children. This is the responsibility that we took as parents. As parents, we took on this responsibility that I will make sure my children are well-educated, that they're well-fed, that they are spiritually uplifted. And if we are not fulfilling that, if we are not doing it, then we are missing out on our responsibility. So us living here, we must ask ourselves a few questions. And the questions are related to our children and the preservation of our children. So the questions that we have to ask ourselves, number one is, how concerned are we about the spiritual well-being of our children? How concerned are we? Do I think about it? Do I speak to my wife about it? Do I speak to my husband about it? About my children's spiritual well-being? And how are they doing spiritually? Are they praying their salah? Are they doing what they need to do? and so on and so forth? Are they learning about Islam? Do they know about the Prophet ﷺ? This is the first and foremost question. How concerned are we about the spiritual well-being of our children? And these are questions I'm not asking to you for you to answer, but rather for you to ponder and think about. Each and every single one of you must think, and we will address the answer in many different ways. Some of us will think and we'll say that, we're doing a lot for our children, but is it not that we can do more? Is it not possible to do more? If we think that, yes, alhamdulillah, my child is praying his salah, my child is, knows about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, my child knows about the Sahaba, and so on. Is it not possible that we can make our children kuffar? Is it not possible to do more for them? Many of us, we had different childhoods. We had different circumstances. So many of us, we grew up in a different country. And so when we migrated here, we had different challenges. And we didn't have all the opportunities that now we have. And so now we must think for ourselves that the things that I missed out, maybe when I was growing up, I didn't have the opportunity to memorize the Quran. Maybe. Growing up, maybe I didn't memorize so much Quran. But now, my children have the opportunity to memorize the Quran. I can give my children that opportunity. But if we take the easy route, if we say, you know what, the vast majority of the public is going and sending their kids to public school. And so I will send my kids to public school and they'll spend 8 hours a day, in that environment. Then that's our choice. That's our decision to make. But understand, that's just the easy route. That's just what everyone is doing. That doesn't make it the right option. That doesn't make it the right option. But rather that's what everyone is doing. Or that's what majority of people are doing. So therefore, I think one scholar was telling me recently that there was an interview with Khabib, and I don't really watch, to be honest, I don't really watch these types of interviews or these types of individuals. But nonetheless, he was telling me about something that Khabib mentioned. That supposedly he was saying in an interview that I don't understand how people can send their kids to such an environment, right? For 1/3 of their lives, for at least 8 hours a day. That's a good portion of their awakened state. A majority of their awakened state is in a non-Muslim environment. And we send our kids to those public schools. We send them to public school, and I'll speak about, I'm not here to bash public school, by the way, I'm just bringing a point. So we send our kids to public school, and they go there, and they're in a non-Muslim environment, they're being taught by majority non-Muslims, and then, so this was what he was saying, he's saying, I don't understand how you can do this to your children. So I also don't understand. Genuinely, I don't understand. Like how we can send our kids to that type of environment and then not be concerned about their religious well-being. It's okay if you send your kids to public school, that's a different story. Right? I'm not addressing that today. But understand that after sending them to public school, it's also important that we look after their spiritual well-being. That they're also still learning about Islam, that they're still doing other things. They're still praying their salah. Even when they go to public school, they're still praying salah. And I know kids, mashallah, even in our community, mashallah, who do pray their salah regularly, even in public school, mashallah. I know kids, mashallah, who are very concerned about their deen, mashallah, even while going to public school, mashallah. So it's not that public school is the issue, but rather it's our responsibility to educate our children and to make sure that even if they are going to public school, that they are still concerned and that they still have a good dini upbringing. They still have a good dini upbringing. So don't think that the education is over because they're going to school. Don't think that education is over in those hours of the day, but rather that's the secular education. Now you have a whole different responsibility, which is their Islamic education. Every single one of us must be concerned about their Islamic education. Every single one of us must be concerned about our children's well-being. We must think, again, going back to the first question, how concerned are we regarding the spiritual well-being of our children? So, for example, right, I mean, alhamdulillah, mashallah, it's very nice to see so many kids here, mashallah. Believe me, I love it. I love it when all of these kids are here, mashallah. They're joining, mashallah, for Jumu'ah and so on. It's amazing. But my question is, what are they doing throughout the rest of the year? Today they're off from school, but what are they doing throughout the rest of the year? Some schools, some public schools, they offer Jummah. I know this. So I don't know the quality of their Jummah, but at least they're doing it. MashaAllah, whatever they're doing, at least they're doing it. I don't know the quality, I cannot speak to the quality. But at least they're doing Jummah in public school. But many of our kids are not doing Jummah in public school, in any sphere. They're not doing Jummah at all. For weeks and months at end, unfortunately. Our kids are not praying Jummah. This is not a good sign. If our kids are not praying Jummah from this age, they will not be praying Jummah when they're 25. They will not be praying Jummah when they're 35, 45. Believe me, I deal with so many different people. I was speaking to one sister the other day. She was discussing about some issues that she had and so on and so forth. Long story short, at the end of it, I said, sister, you know what, you should go to the masjid, you should try to, be connected to the masjid. And so then she said, no, you know what, I do my chants regularly. I do my chants regularly. I was confused. I was like, what is she talking about? And so I realized that she was talking about dhikr or something like this. So she was saying that she does her dhikr regularly. Right? Meaning, it's so bad, unfortunately, that many of our kids, and she was raised here and so on, they don't pray salah, they don't even know salah. Forget about praying salah, they don't even know salah. How many, believe me, so many times, the amount of phone calls I get, I would like to marry a non-Muslim. Male and female, it goes from both ways, unfortunately. And I don't do those marriages. And that's just because I feel that whenever a Muslim marries a non-Muslim, unfortunately, I see a stark decline in their religion. Unfortunately, their iman is not guaranteed. And their kids' iman is definitely not guaranteed. So, going back, I understand us and our kids, if we don't raise our kids well, if we don't teach our kids well, if we are not concerned about their deen, believe me, wallahi, they will leave Islam. Believe me, they will leave Islam. And this is something that you and I, we must be so concerned about. This must be at the forefront of our mind. Because dunya, alhamdulillah, mashallah, we're living in loud and country, mashallah, very well taken care of, mashallah. So dunya is not the concern. Deen is the concern. Dunya will come. Allah, He promises us. Allah tells us that dunya, Allah will give us. But deen is the concern. How we can live and how we can die as Muslims. And not only us, but also our kids. As Allah Ta'ala speaks in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. Save yourself and your kids, your families from the fire of Jahannam. Now we must be concerned. I must be always thinking, you know how we always think, okay, what's the next trip for my kid? You know, what are we going to do next? How are their grades at school and so on? We think about this all the time, which is good. You should do it. You should do it. But along with that, we should be concerned about their salah. We should be concerned about their knowledge of deen. Believe me, wallahi, I'll tell you, so many of our kids, they don't know the basics of deen. This is the unfortunate reality, that many of our kids don't know the basics of our deen. They don't know the basics of salah. They don't know the basics of Islam. They don't know the basics of the prophets. They don't know the Sahaba. They don't know most of these things. Anyways, going back, right? This is, I'm skipping a bit, but the first is understanding our responsibility. Right? That our responsibility is not only for the physical well-being, but also the spiritual well-being of our children. Right? The second question is, we love our children, of course, but are we okay with seeing them going towards kufr? This is a hard question, but ask yourself, are you okay with seeing your children as non-Muslims? Oftentimes, especially for the younger generation here as well, right? Generally, when people are considering marriage, I tell them all the time that consider Islam. Islam should be the primary thing, as it comes in hadith. That should be the most important thing. Because if Islam is not the priority, then you will not find Islam in your generation. So as I said, I don't do marriages between Muslim and non-Muslim, because I don't see that marriage lasting, unfortunately. I've dealt with many cases where in some cases, what happens is the marriage falls through and then Islam also falls through. Right? They leave the marriage, they get divorced, and then they leave Islam as well. I've seen that happen as well. And so therefore, the second thing is, we need to ask ourselves, are we okay with our children going towards kufr. And the reality is that public school education, a lot of what they're teaching is kufr. They're teaching and they're indoctrinating. They tell us that you shouldn't indoctrinate your kids. But what are you doing when you send them to public school? They're indoctrinating them. They're teaching them for 8 hours the same thing over and over and over and over and over. Right? That you are not from Adam and Hawa, but rather you are from monkeys and apes. There's this XYZ, long story short, there's no God, atheism, all of these things, right? Because most of the vast majority of people, they don't believe in God, right? Even though they may say that they're Christians and so on, but they may not believe in God. Even if they do believe in God, they believe in God on a part-time basis. On a part-time basis, they believe in God. So on Sundays, they believe in God. And then the rest of the week, it's okay. So we Muslims, unfortunately, I see the trajectory heading in that direction. Unfortunately, I see Muslims heading in that direction, where we only believe in Allah on Friday. We only pray Salah on Friday. And all the rest of the week, we do not pray Salah. This is the problem. This is what I'm seeing with my own eyes, unfortunately. And this is the situation you and I, we must change. We must change the situation. We must give importance to deen. There was a time when we didn't have masajid, we didn't have scholars, we didn't have activities. Now, alhamdulillah, we have all of these things. What excuse will you make? What excuse will you make that I didn't have anything? I didn't have the scholars? Yes, you did. You have the masajid, you have the scholars. So therefore, it's important that we think about these things. That now, alhamdulillah, we have masajid. Most of you all live 10-15 minutes away, mashallah. Within 10-15 minutes, mashallah. Within 10-15 minutes, mashallah. In most parts of Northern Virginia, you can find a masjid, mashallah. Even if you're traveling, you can find a masjid, mashallah. I remember meeting people in different parts of the country that they would drive hours for Jumu'ah. Hours they would drive for Jumu'ah. And I'm sure many of you also, face the same issue, where you would drive for many hours just to pray Jumu'ah. And now, alhamdulillah, we have masajid. Alhamdulillah, we have scholars, alhamdulillah. Why would we not take, and subhanAllah, myself growing up, forget about others. Myself, when I was growing up, a few years ago, I didn't have access to English-speaking scholars. We didn't have access to English-speaking scholars. We had to speak, very explicitly, our Jumu'ahs were in other languages. Our Jumu'ah, again, the main sermon of the week was in Bangla, was in Urdu, was in another Arabic, was an entire different language. It was not in English. And now, alhamdulillah, we have this opportunity. We have qualified scholars, mashallah, throughout the country, alhamdulillah. Why would we not benefit? And so therefore, we must ask ourselves, are we okay with seeing our children going first? That's the second thing. Now, I'll just skip a bit forward because we're short on time. Just to go to our responsibilities. What is our responsibility as parents? The first thing I mentioned is education. Education is the first and primary thing. Yes, we are concerned about the secular education. We are very concerned, alhamdulillah, which is good, mashallah. You should be concerned about their secular education. I'm not saying you should not be concerned. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should be concerned about their secular education. But if not equally or more, you should be concerned about their Islamic education. That they should be good Muslims. Right? Are you happy with this? Ask yourselves this. My kid will be a multi-millionaire, but they will not be a Muslim. Are you okay with that? Ask yourself. Am I okay with Islam leading my family? Am I okay if after I pass away, my kids lead Islam or my grandkids lead Islam? Am I okay with that? Ask yourselves these questions. And then you have to raise your kids in that manner. That they are closer towards Deen, that they love the Deen, that they pray Salah not because they fear you. They don't pray Salah because they fear you, but because they love Allah Ta'ala. That they pray Salah even when you're not there. That they worship Allah Ta'ala even when you're not there. They do good things even when you're not there. That they know Allah Ta'ala. They know the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. They know the Sahaba. SubhanAllah, we have access to so many resources, right? Paid and free resources, mashallah. Right? Learning about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is, in the past, maybe you had to read books. In the past, you had to do so many other things. But now, mashallah, you have so many classes on the seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. There's so many classes on YouTube, online. So many scholars, they teach about the seerah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So many scholars, they teach about the fiqh, right? Whatever you're supposed to do. Whether your salawat, your tahara, your hajj, your zakat, everything, your fasting. So many scholars will speak about it. And so we have access to all of these scholars. And if you don't know where to learn something from, just ask me. I will connect you, inshallah. I will connect you with whichever sphere of knowledge you'd like to learn, inshallah. But the fact is that we have access to so much knowledge. And so if we are not educating our children, it's only us to blame. We are only to blame. If we are not spending time educating our children, every single one of us, don't think that, okay, you know what, the masjid must teach the kids, or someone else will teach the kids. No. As parents, we must teach our kids. We must take responsibility of educating our children and instilling good values in them. It's our responsibility. And we must think of it as our responsibility. That I need to make sure my child is learning about the Prophet ﷺ, that they know about the Sahaba. So the first thing, and I want to move quickly because these are very important topics, right? The first is education. We must make sure that our kids are well educated in Islam, that they know and they love Islam. And the only way that they will love Islam is if they know about Islam. They cannot love Islam if they don't know Islam. And if they practice Islam now, because of our fear for you, this will not remain. This will not last. So the first is that educate them about Islam. The second is the environment. Environment inside the house and outside of the house. The environment inside the house must be pristine. We must preserve the environment inside the house. We must make sure that there's an environment of reading Quran, that there's an environment of learning about Islam. Let's be honest with ourselves. We spend, when we think about family time, let's be honest with ourselves. When we think about family time with our kids, what do we think? Watching a movie, going somewhere outside. This is a common for most of us. I'm speaking about myself. Most of us, when we think about family time, we're thinking about these things. We're not thinking about Quran. We're not thinking about Islam. Whereas that's so much more important. We're willing to spend, it's the reality. We're willing to spend 3 hours watching some movies. We're willing to spend so many hours watching movies and doing other things. But we're not willing to spend at least 30 minutes reading some Quran with our kids. This is the reality. Unfortunately, we don't do this. And we need to ask ourselves why. It's because we don't give importance to Islam. If we don't give importance to Islam, our kids will never understand the value of Islam. If we are not bringing our kids for Jumu'ah, then they will never come for Jumu'ah. If we are not praying Salah with them, they will never pray Salah. If they don't see their parents praying Salah, why would the kids pray Salah? If when we're traveling on a road trip, we don't stop and say, okay, let's pray our Salah. But we do stop for food, we do stop for bathroom breaks, we do stop for everything else. Some of us will even stop for smoke breaks, but we will not stop for Salah. This is unfortunate. And so we ourselves as parents, we must take responsibility first to pray our Salah, to read Quran, to teach, to learn Deen, to teach Deen. We must understand that responsibility for ourselves first. On a regular basis, we must teach our kids about Islam. Just to give you, this is real life. I think last year, or a couple months ago, I was speaking to some of the students here in our community. I was speaking to some of them and we were discussing, we think that when we think about environment, we generally think about environment outside of the house. We think that, okay, you know what, my kids should not go to the clubs, my kids should not be hanging out with people they should not be hanging out with and so on. But the environment at home is very important as well. If your kids are at home, but they're spending so many hours playing games, so many hours watching movies, so many hours on social media, then they're not really benefiting. We're not really protecting them. We've given them unrestricted access to the internet. That's so dangerous. Unrestricted access to the internet is extremely dangerous. Think about it for yourself. Have you given, some of us, we say, oh, I didn't give them a phone, but you gave them an iPod, you gave them an iPad, you gave them laptop, you gave them whatever else. That's also very dangerous. The internet is a very dangerous place for those who don't know. Anyway, just to give you an example, for one student, I was going around, I was saying, how much time do you guys spend on your phones? So one student, and then we got to TikTok. I was like, how much time do you spend on TikTok? So I asked, going through the line, I asked one student, believe me, wallahi, this is a student from our community, one of the teenagers in our area. I said, how much time you spend on TikTok? He said, 40 plus hours he spends on a weekly basis on TikTok. 40 hours. That's a full-time job. It's a full-time job, 40 hours plus they're spending on TikTok. Think about it. I mean, like, subhanAllah, like, now, yeah, some of us are laughing because, I mean, we also spend time on TikTok. Now, think about how much time. Go check your screen time. Check your screen time, how much time you're spending on TikTok, right? Or on other social media, on Facebook, or, you know, the older community on Facebook or whatever else we're spending time, YouTube, whatever. Think about it. How much time am I spending on it? Our kids, yes, outside, they should also be safe from the outside environment, but also the inside, the home environment also, they should be safe. They should not be involved in all of these things. Anyways, I'm very short on time, but educate our kids. Dr. Jawed Parvez, who visited a few years ago, he said every single parent should spend 10 minutes with their child. I mention this all the time. We should spend 10 minutes with our children, each one individually. You may say, I have 4 kids, what should I do? Well, spend 40 minutes. You spend 40 minutes today, they will talk to you 40 years down the road, or at least 10, 20 years down the road. If you don't spend 40 minutes today, they will not talk to you 10 years later. They will not spend 20 minutes with you later. They will not want to speak to you. So you spend, even if you have like multiple kids, spend time talking to them, spend time learning about them, spend time understanding what they like, be their friend. There's no beating. You know, Islam, you cannot teach Islam through beatings. You cannot teach Islam through beatings. You must teach it through love. So my suggestion, my recommendation is every single person should spend some time with their child on a regular basis, on a daily basis. My humble request, please spend 15 minutes every single day reading some book with your family, with the entire family. Spend 15 minutes. Now, not 15 hours, 15 minutes. Spend 15 minutes reading some book, some Islamic book about the seerah, or watching some good lecture or something. Spend 15 minutes a day, every single day. This is my humble request. And then finally, my request, and there's so much to speak about, but I'm just going to ignore. I mean, there's so much, inshallah, we'll talk about it in the future. But join our maktab. Join Zakaria, mashallah, maktab, alhamdulillah. In summer, we had more than 100 kids, alhamdulillah. In the past year, alhamdulillah, we had more than 100 kids, alhamdulillah. We have more than a dozen teachers, alhamdulillah. Just to give you an idea about our maktab, alhamdulillah, we have more than a dozen teachers, including 8 scholars, male and female, 8 male and female scholars, mashallah. This is, many communities do not have this. Believe me, many communities do not have this. Alhamdulillah, we have more than 8 male and female scholars, alhamdulillah. And then some other kufal and some other assistants as well, alhamdulillah. But the reality is, more than a dozen scholars, a dozen teachers, alhamdulillah. We are, you know, just to give you an idea, I mean, we have the weekday maktab, alhamdulillah, which is 5 to 7 on Monday to Thursday. More than 100 kids past year, mashallah. But now we're starting the weekend maktab. For all the older guys who make the excuse, I can move to school very late and all that. And they make all the excuses to bring them on the weekends. Now you'll say, oh man, my kids, they can't be learning every day. SubhanAllah, we're okay with them learning 40 hours a week for secular education, but not 6 hours a week for Islamic education. It's too much. You know, the weekend is for the family. Ajib. What about their Islam? So anyways, I'm not going to take much time. Please, if not the weekday, please bring them for the weekend. Every single one of our kids should be coming through the maktab. Every single one of them. We use the curriculum we use, alhamdulillah. It's an amazing curriculum. It's the An-Nasiha curriculum from the UK, mashallah. Believe me, wallahi, I'll tell you. There are families from our community who took the kids and sent them to Islamic school, not realizing that we teach the same exact curriculum. You pay $1,000 in another Islamic school, you pay $100 a month here. We teach the exact same curriculum. And rather, we have qualified scholars. Whereas many of the Islamic schools, they don't have real scholars, unfortunately. And we're working towards building good Islamic schools. And as you may be aware, inshallah. But nonetheless, our maktab, alhamdulillah, is very solid. Bring them for the weekday or the weekend maktab. Please, this is very good, alhamdulillah. Also, I mean, obviously, the price is also very reasonable. It's like $100 a month for both. We want kids to come in, so it doesn't really matter. We don't really care about, prices and so on. If you can't pay, you can't pay. Don't worry about the money. Just bring your kids. Sometimes we make the excuse that, no, I can't bring them. I don't have a ride. I'm working or whatever else. Figure it out. Carpool. We need to speak to some families and carpool together to the masjid. This is very important. And lastly, sometimes we make the excuse that, you know what, my kids are learning online. My kids are learning online. Believe me, wallahi, I feel like crying. Whenever I hear, like some parents, they tell me, my kids are learning online. Believe me, I feel like crying. Because I'm so embarrassed. So sometimes they invite me to the Quran khatams. The students, the parents, they invite me to the Quran khatams. And it's like embarrassing for me to sit there. Believe me, wallah, it's very embarrassing. Like I'm sitting there and the kid does not know how to read the Quran. Because what? You wanted to save a few dollars and you want to teach them online. It's a bit more convenient for you. So that's why you get them with terrible teachers who spend, and they don't learn anything. They don't, and the teachers oftentimes they don't speak English. Oftentimes, again, you're missing out on the environment here. You're also missing out on what? Islamic studies. We teach Islamic studies here. They don't teach Islamic studies online. So, my respected brothers and sisters, please, my humble request is, please, bring them, whether here or somewhere else. I don't care. You don't have to bring them here. I'm just telling you that we have a great curriculum here, mashallah. But please make sure that they're learning about Islam, that they're studying the deen, they know how to pray salah, they know how to read Quran, and that they're reading Quran properly, and that they're praying salah properly, that they love Islam. Not that, we ignore their responsibilities. Our children are our most important investments. I'll conclude with the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, we know this hadith very well, that when a person passes away, all his actions are now done. Everything is done, except for a couple of things. And one of them is waladun salih yad'u. It's a righteous child who will pray for that person. Our children are the biggest investments because they will benefit us not only in this life, but more importantly in the next life, inshallah. And if we don't teach our kids how to pray, then our kids will not be praying for us when we pass away. When we die, our kids will not read Quran. Why? Because they cannot read Quran. Because we never taught them to read Quran. So they will not read Quran. If we don't instill the values of making dua, then they will not make dua for us. And we need those du'as. We need them to recite Quran. So, the request to you all is to be more concerned about the religious well-being of the kids. My last message, please bring them for Jumu'ah. Please. Whether other salawat or whatever, but at least bring them for Jumu'ah. Believe me, Jumu'ah is so important. I know sometimes they take the kids out of school for Jumu'ah. Do it, please. Believe me, you will see the benefit of that, inshallah. May Allah give me personally, with all the tawfiq and practice.